Hello there, my name is Joe Brailsford and I'm a researcher out of the University of Melbourne, and I'd like to present to you our paper for SIGCHI 2024, which I've written alongside Frank Vetere and Eduardo Velloso. It's titled Exploring the Associations Between Moral Foundations and Judgements of Artificial Intelligence Behaviour, and in which we look to investigate the relationships between individual differences in moral constitution and perceptions and judgments of AI behaviour. I'd like to begin by introducing the term moral tension, which Jess Whittleston and company have referred to as any conflict, whether apparent, contingent, or fundamental, between important values or goals, where it appears necessary to give up one in order to realize another. Now, moral tensions are what give rise to moral judgments, as a way of reconciling the conflict between differences in response to the moral tension. Now, moral judgments are typically reserved for human-to-human behavior, but are increasingly being applied to the behavior of artificial intelligence systems. And as these systems themselves become increasingly capable of making decisions and are more influential in our day-to-day lives. The field of moral psychology has evolved as a means of understanding how and why people respond differently to morally contentious behavior. And in particular, moral foundation theory has been developed as an empirically backed tool for measuring differences in moral judgments and how this is related to a person's underlying moral constitution. Moral foundation theory states that there are 6 fundamental foundations: care, equality, proportionality, authority, loyalty, and purity. And it's our sensitivity to each of these foundations that affects how we judge the behavior that are associated with each of them. For example, if I'm a loyal person, then I'd be more sensitive to and think more negatively of violations of loyalty, such as betrayal towards my family or perhaps my favorite sports team. According to moral foundation theory, these foundations act as a moral lens through which we interact with the world, and they influence how we respond to the moral tensions that we previously discussed. In order to measure this sensitivity, moral foundation theory uses what's called the Moral Foundations Questionnaire, which comprises of a series of questions that elicit one's sensitivity to each of the 6 moral foundations. Moral foundation theory has been used in the context of AI by Cesar Hidalgo in his book How Humans Judge Machines, in which he looked to unpack some of the moral foundations that individuals ascribe to AI behavior. In particular, he looked at the differences between how people perceive human behavior versus the behavior of AI systems. However, their studies stopped short of asking whether their participants judged the behavior in the experiments as being morally right or morally wrong, and they didn't attempt to associate how people responded to their individual moral constitution by using the Moral Foundation Questionnaire. To address this gap, we created a directed acyclical graph, which represents our 3 research questions, through which we hope to investigate whether moral foundation theory could tell us something about how people perceive and make judgments of the behavior of AI. Our research questions refer to certain arrows within this DAG. Firstly, arrow B asks the research question, to what extent do people agree on the moral foundations associated or perceived with the morally contentious behavior of AI systems? Arrow D asks, is the moral foundation that a person perceives as most relevant related to their MFQ score? And finally, arrow C asks the research question, to what degree do individual moral characteristics, as per the MFQ, determine how a person judges morally contentious behavior that's carried out by an AI system? To answer these questions, we created 6 different scenarios, each designed to elicit a response in relation to each of the 6 moral foundations. Participants responded to these scenarios by passing a moral judgment, as well as rating and ranking the moral foundations they deemed most relevant to each scenario. For each question, participants were also asked qualitatively to explain the thinking behind their responses. And finally, each participant completed the Moral Foundation Questionnaire, which gave us the baseline of their individual moral constitution. We ran our study online by recruiting 240 participants through the crowdsourcing platform Prolific, which we chose to balance the cohort across the political spectrum, as prior work has shown that moral foundations correlate with political ideology, and we selected individuals who were fluent in English from the UK and the US. Through our first research question, we wanted to simply understand whether people agree on the moral foundation that they deemed as most relevant to a given scenario. In other words, do people see the same moral foundation with respect to a given AI behavior? Now, to answer this, we used data from the moral foundation, which participants ranked as most relevant to each scenario, and looked for agreement amongst the responses. We found people somewhat agree. Despite the fact that we tried to design each scenario to elicit a specific moral foundation, it was neither a resounding yes nor an absolute no. We only saw a fair agreement for each of the scenarios, which, at the same time, means there's also quite a lot of disagreement on which foundation was the most relevant to each scenario. With this disagreement in mind, our second research question looked to see whether the strength of a person's moral foundations could explain the variability in their responses. In other words, do people bias their response towards the moral foundations that they are most sensitive towards? To answer this, we modeled the individual Moral Foundation Questionnaire scores for each foundation against the foundation ratings for each scenario. The results of our analysis indicated a positive correlation between individual MFQ scores and whether the corresponding foundation was deemed relevant to the behavior of the AI system. However, this correlation was only very slight, and it was by no means as strong as what we were anticipating it to be. Finally, we wanted to know whether a person's MFQ score could help us to anticipate how they might judge the behavior of the AI system in each of the scenarios. To answer this, we modeled the judgment scores against each of the individual's moral foundation scores, along with their rating for each of the moral foundations. And we found that, other than for the care foundation, there was practically no predictive power in knowing someone's MFQ score when trying to anticipate how they will judge the behavior of the AI systems in each of our scenarios. Now, the models for our quantitative analysis are available in full detail in the paper and the supplementary materials. We saw a huge range in the responses people gave when asked to judge the behavior of AI systems in our scenarios, all the way from extremely right to extremely wrong for the same scenario. So the question remained, what exactly might account for this variability in how people judge our scenarios? And to answer that, we went looking into the qualitative responses from our data. For each of the quantitative questions, we asked participants to tell us why they gave the answer that they did, which turned out to be quite revealing. To analyze the qualitative information for each scenario, we ordered the responses according to their judgment scores. We then ran a thematic analysis over the responses to identify any patterns in the justification for the participants' responses. Now, we found that those who judged the AI behavior as mostly wrong gave the AI systems an increasing amount of agency to make the decisions in each of the scenarios. This increase in agency appeared to correlate with an increase in the use of anthropomorphic language, with participants describing AI system behavior in human-like terms. Conversely, those who responded to the behavior of the AI systems as being ethically right increasingly made reference to the specific role that the AI system played in the overarching decision. Now, with this in mind, participants also demonstrated a greater understanding that there were more parties involved in the outcome of the scenario than simply the AI system itself, indicating that there was perhaps a shared responsibility for the outcome, and that people in fact passed their judgments where they attributed the responsibility. Our study looked to understand how individual moral foundations might influence perceptions and judgments of AI behavior. Our findings from our first research question reveal a notable lack of consensus on the moral foundations deemed relevant to AI behavior across our different scenarios. This diversity in moral perception underscores the complexity and difficulty in applying sets of uniform ethical guidelines to the design, development, and deployment of AI systems, which in turn highlights the importance of acknowledging the spectrum of moral judgments that individuals might have towards a given AI behavior. Now, in our attempt to delve deeper into the associations between individual moral foundations and the perceptions of AI, we discovered only a mild positive correlation, which suggests that while there is some connection between an individual's moral foundations and their perceptions and judgments of AI, this relationship alone is not strong enough to reliably predict judgments based on MFQ scores alone. Beyond the care foundation, the other moral foundations themselves didn't appear to significantly influence the judgments on AI behaviour. But at the same time, this points to an individual's sensitivity to the care foundation as being important in determining how individuals morally evaluate AI actions. This emphasizes the need for AI systems to be designed and communicated in a way that clearly aligns with the care and empathy towards those affected by their decisions. Our results suggested a dynamic relationship that exists between an individual's technical understanding of AI systems, their moral intuitions, and the degree to which they anthropomorphise the system. The combination of moral intuitions failing to fully translate to interactions with AI and the widespread anthropomorphism communicated in the qualitative data suggests that some individuals attempt to retrofit moral intuitions by mentally overlaying AI systems with familiar and reliable human-like features. And in doing so, participants were able to take something unfamiliar and apply pre-established mental heuristics in an attempt to relate to the behaviour and make their moral judgments. We hope that you enjoyed this presentation, and we hope that you'll enjoy reading our paper, and we welcome any further discussions related to our findings. Thank you for listening.